God, stay close to me and clear my thoughts and give hope again. I know how heavy it feels when your mind refuses to slow down. You want peace, but your thoughts keep racing ahead of your faith. You want to hear God, but the noise inside you feels louder than His voice. And the hardest part is not the confusion itself, it is the fear that maybe this confusion means something is wrong with you. Maybe you are drifting. Maybe your faith is weaker than it used to be. Let me speak to you clearly right now. What you are experiencing is not failure. It is a signal that your soul is tired and asking for rest. There are moments in life when your inner world becomes crowded. Responsibilities pile up, expectations press in, memories resurface, and worries about the future refuse to stay quiet. You still believe, you still want God. But everything inside feels tangled, and in that tension, you start to feel distant from Him, not because He moved, but because your mind has been carrying weight without release. That distance hurts because you were never created to walk alone inside your own thoughts. Listen carefully. God does not wait for you on the other side of clarity. He does not stand back until you sort yourself out. He meets you in the confusion, in the mental fatigue, in the place where you feel unsure how to even pray. When your thoughts feel scattered, God is not confused about you. When your mind feels overwhelmed, God is not overwhelmed by you. He is present, attentive, and closer than you realize. This is not a moment to perform spirituality or force calm words out of your mouth. This is a moment to be honest, to admit that you need Him near, to allow Him to quiet what you cannot control. Hope does not return by effort alone. It returns when you let God stand with you in the middle of what feels unresolved. Stay with me now. Do not pull away. What you are about to hear is not meant to impress you, but to steady you. You are not alone in this moment, and you are not beyond peace. God is already closer than your thoughts suggest, when your mind is louder than your prayers. There are times when you sit down to pray, and your mind refuses to cooperate. You begin with intention, but within seconds your thoughts interrupt you. Worries surface, conversations replay, scenarios unfold that have not even happened yet. And suddenly, prayer feels exhausting instead of comforting. In those moments, many people quietly blame themselves. They assume something is broken in their faith. They think a focused mind equals spiritual strength, and a distracted mind equals spiritual weakness. That belief is not true, and it has caused unnecessary guilt for too long. When your mind is loud, it does not mean God stopped listening. It means your heart is full of things you have not processed, emotions you have not released, and pressures you have been carrying without rest. Prayer was never meant to be a performance of control. It was meant to be a place of refuge. God does not measure the quality of your prayer by how calm your thoughts are. He measures it by your willingness to come as you are. There is something important you need to understand. The noise in your mind often increases when you are close to something meaningful. When your soul is asking for healing, clarity, or direction, resistance rises internally. Your thoughts try to protect you, prepare you, and control outcomes. But in doing so, they drown out the quiet space where God speaks peace. This does not mean you should fight your thoughts harder. It means you should stop fearing them. Instead of apologizing for your distraction, bring it into the prayer itself. Tell God exactly what is interrupting you. Speak the worry instead of hiding it. Acknowledge the fear instead of suppressing it. God is not disturbed by your honesty. He is invited by it. The moment you stop pretending to be focused is often the moment prayer becomes real again. You are not failing because your mind is loud. You are learning what it means to rely on God beyond mental control. Faith does not begin when thoughts disappear. Faith begins when you trust God even while they remain. And as you stay here, you will discover that this struggle is not a barrier between you and God. It is the doorway through which he begins to quiet your soul in a deeper way than you expected. The exhaustion of thinking too much and feeling too little. There is a specific kind of tiredness that sleep does not fix. It comes from thinking non-stop while feeling disconnected from your own heart. You analyze everything, replay conversations, imagine outcomes, prepare for pain before it even arrives. Your mind stays busy, but your emotions feel distant, muted, almost numb. And in that state, you start wondering where your passion for God went, why worship feels flat, and why hope no longer stirs you the way it used to. This exhaustion is not laziness, and it is not spiritual coldness. It is the result of living in survival mode for too long. When the mind is constantly active, the heart goes into protection. Feeling deeply becomes risky, so it shuts down to avoid disappointment. Overthinking creates the illusion of control, but it slowly drains your capacity to feel joy, peace, and trust. You still believe in God, but belief feels intellectual instead of alive. You know the words of faith, yet they do not seem to reach the places that hurt. That disconnect can make you feel guilty, as if something essential is missing inside you. But what is missing is not faith. What is missing is rest. God never designed your mind to carry everything alone. When thoughts pile up without release, emotional numbness follows. This numbness is not rejection of God. It is a signal that your inner world is overloaded. And here is the truth most people never hear. God does not demand emotional intensity from you. He does not require you to feel inspired every day. He meets you even when you feel empty, even when your heart feels quiet, even when all you can offer is your presence. There are seasons when God allows the feelings to soften so you can learn to trust Him without emotional reinforcement, not because He wants distance, but because He wants depth. Feeling less does not mean loving God less. Sometimes it means you are being invited into a faith that is steadier, quieter, and more resilient than before. A faith that remains even when emotions fluctuate. If you are exhausted from thinking too much and feeling too little, stop accusing yourself. Bring that tiredness to God exactly as it is. Tell Him you are worn out. Tell Him you miss feeling alive inside. He does not respond with disappointment. He responds with patience. And as you continue, you will begin to see how God gently reconnects the heart once the mind releases its grip. What comes next will help you understand why this inner exhaustion often creates the illusion that God is far, even when He is closer than ever. Why God feels far when your thoughts are close. There are moments when God feels distant, not because you stop believing, but because your thoughts never give you space to notice Him. Your mind stays engaged with problems, responsibilities, expectations, and silent fears. Even in quiet moments, something inside keeps talking, planning, remembering, anticipating. And in that constant inner dialogue, God's presence feels faint, almost unreachable. This is not because He stepped back. It is because your attention has been pulled inward for too long without rest. When thoughts remain close, they become the primary lens through which you interpret everything, including God. You begin to measure His closeness by how clearly you sense Him, how strongly you feel Him, or how quickly He responds. But God's presence was never meant to compete with your mental activity. He does not shout over your thoughts. He waits patiently beneath them. The problem is not that God is far. The problem is that your awareness has been crowded. There is a subtle danger in over-identifying with your thoughts. When you believe every thought deserves your attention, you slowly disconnect from the stillness where God speaks peace. Thoughts are not your enemy, but they were never meant to lead your soul. When they do, they create the illusion that God is absent, simply because you cannot perceive Him through mental noise. Yet God has always been closer than your thoughts, not beyond them. You need to hear this without fear. God's closeness is not something you create with focus. It is something you recognize when you stop demanding constant mental clarity. Many people wait to feel calm before turning to God, assuming they must quiet their mind first. But God does not wait for silence to draw near. He waits for trust. Trust that He is present even when your mind is active. Trust that His nearness does not disappear when your thoughts multiply. If God feels far right now, do not chase feelings or force awareness. Simply acknowledge Him where you are. Right in the middle of your thinking, right in the middle of your questions. His presence does not depend on your mental state. It depends on His faithfulness, and He has never failed to stay close. As you continue listening, you will discover something freeing. God does not ask you to escape your thoughts to find Him. He invites you to let Him enter them, and that changes everything. Letting God enter the messy parts of your mind. Most people believe they need to clean up their thoughts before coming to God. They wait until confusion settles, until doubts fade, until emotions feel more organized. And because that rarely happens, they delay intimacy with God without realizing it. They assume clarity is the doorway to His presence, but God does not wait at the door of order. He steps directly into the mess you are trying to hide. The messy parts of your mind are not obstacles to God. They are invitations. Confusion, doubt, mental fatigue, unanswered questions, and even fear are not signs of spiritual failure. They are signs that you are human and that you have reached the limits of self-control. God is not repelled by those limits. He is drawn to them. He enters where you feel overwhelmed, not where you feel composed. There is something deeply liberating when you stop filtering yourself before God, when you no longer try to present a calmer version of your mind, when you allow the unfinished thoughts, the conflicting emotions, and the unresolved questions to be seen. God does not require you to understand yourself before He understands you. He already knows what you cannot explain, and He is not waiting for you to fix it. When you let God enter the messy parts of your mind, something subtle begins to shift. You stop fighting yourself. You stop fearing your own thoughts. You stop believing that clarity must come before connection. Instead, connection becomes the place where clarity slowly forms, not all at once, not loudly, but steadily. God works differently than you expect. He does not immediately remove every troubling thought. He changes how much power those thoughts have over you. He reminds you that you are not your confusion. You are not your doubts. You are not your mental noise. You are held even while your mind feels unsettled. This is where peace begins. Not when everything makes sense, but when you realize God is fully present in what does not. And once you experience this, you will notice something else rising. A deep exhaustion from trying to control your inner world. That exhaustion leads to a moment of surrender you may have been resisting, and that moment is where real peace starts to take shape. The moment you stop trying to control your peace. There comes a moment when you realize how tired you are, not from life itself, but from trying to manage how you feel about it. You have been monitoring your emotions, correcting your thoughts, forcing yourself to stay positive, reminding yourself to have faith. And while all of that came from a good place, it quietly turned peace into a responsibility you had to maintain. That is when peace becomes fragile, because anything you have to control can also be lost. Trying to control your peace often feels like strength, but underneath it is fear. Fear of falling apart, fear of feeling too much, fear of losing stability if you let go even a little. So you tighten your grip. You manage your reactions. You suppress what feels unsafe. You tell yourself you are fine when you are not. And slowly, that effort drains you. Not because you are weak, but because peace was never meant to be produced by effort alone. God never asked you to manufacture peace. He asked you to trust Him with what disturbs it. There is a difference. Control says I must keep everything steady so I do not break. Trust says, I can release what I cannot hold because I am not alone. The moment you stop trying to control your peace is not the moment you give up. It is the moment you finally rest. This is difficult because surrender feels like vulnerability. It feels like exposure. It feels like admitting that you cannot protect yourself the way you thought you could. But God does not shame you in that place. He meets you there. When you loosen your grip, you make room for Him to carry what you were never meant to hold by yourself. Peace does not arrive as a sudden calm. It arrives as relief. Relief from pretending. Relief from constant self-monitoring. Relief from the pressure to be okay all the time. God replaces control with presence, and presence does not demand perfection. It offers stability even when emotions rise and fall. If you have been trying to control your peace, you can stop now. Not because everything is resolved, but because God is steady even when life is not. And as you release control, something unexpected begins to happen. Your mind does not instantly quiet, but it becomes less threatening. Your thoughts lose authority, and slowly, clarity begins to form, not because you forced it, but because trust created space for God to work in ways you could not orchestrate. How God brings clarity without explaining everything. Most people believe clarity comes when questions are answered, when situations make sense, when God explains why things happened the way they did. But if you have walked with God long enough, you know that answers do not always come when you want them to, and yet somehow clarity still arrives. Not as information, but as stability. Not as explanations, but as direction. God does not calm your mind by satisfying every question. He does it by strengthening the place inside you that can live without all the answers. Clarity is often misunderstood. It is not the absence of uncertainty, it is the presence of trust. God knows that if He explained everything at once, your mind would be full, but your heart would still be restless. So He works deeper. He brings clarity by shifting what you rely on. Instead of depending on understanding, you begin to depend on Him. And that dependence changes how confusion feels. It no longer threatens you the same way. There is a quiet moment when you realize you still do not have answers, but you are no longer anxious about it. Your questions remain, but they stop controlling your emotions. Your thoughts still arise, but they no longer demand immediate resolution. That is clarity. It is not knowing what will happen next. It is knowing you are held no matter what happens next. God is patient with your questions, but He is more concerned with your peace than your curiosity. He knows that the mind can become addicted to explanations, constantly seeking certainty before trusting. So He teaches you to walk without full visibility, not to make life harder, but to make your faith stronger. A faith that collapses without answers is fragile. A faith that stands without them is anchored. This is why clarity often comes after surrender, not before it. When you release the demand to understand everything, your mind relaxes. It stops scanning for danger. It stops rehearsing worst-case scenarios. It starts resting, and in that rest, God rearranges your inner world. Thoughts slow down. Priorities shift. Fear loses intensity. You may not be able to explain what changed, but you can feel that something did. God brings clarity by reminding you who He is, not by explaining everything He does. And once you experience this kind of clarity, you stop chasing answers as urgently as before. You begin to notice something else rising quietly inside you. A sense of confidence, not loud, not dramatic, but steady. And that is where hope begins to return in a way you did not expect. When hope returns as a quiet confidence, hope does not always return with excitement. Sometimes it comes so quietly that you almost miss it. There is no sudden breakthrough, no overwhelming emotion, no dramatic shift in circumstances. Instead, you notice something subtle. You are still facing the same situation, but it no longer feels as heavy. The thoughts that once overwhelmed you are still present, but they do not dominate you the way they used to. That is how real hope often enters, gently, steadily, without noise. Many people expect hope to feel powerful, inspiring, and obvious, but God often restores hope in a quieter form, because quiet confidence lasts longer than emotional intensity. Loud hope can fade quickly. Quiet hope stays. It is the calm assurance that you will be okay, even if you do not know how things will unfold. It is the ability to breathe deeply again, to face tomorrow without the same level of fear, to trust that God is working even when you cannot see evidence yet. This kind of hope is not based on circumstances improving immediately. It is based on your inner world stabilizing. God rebuilds hope by strengthening your foundation, not by removing every challenge at once. He shifts how you relate to uncertainty. Instead of feeling threatened by it, you begin to feel grounded despite it. That grounding changes everything. Problems remain, but panic loosens its grip. Quiet confidence grows when you stop demanding constant reassurance, when you no longer need to feel inspired every day to believe God is present. You begin to recognize His faithfulness in consistency, not in emotional highs. This hope does not rush you. It does not pressure you to feel better quickly. It gives you permission to heal at your own pace, while trusting that God is not in a hurry to abandon you. You may notice that this hope shows up in small ways. A moment of calm where there used to be tension. A decision made with less fear. A thought that once spiraled now stops sooner. These are not coincidences. They are signs that God is restoring your inner stability. He is teaching you to stand without shaking, even when life remains uncertain. And as this quiet confidence settles in, something deeper begins to happen. You realize that you can rest even when not everything is resolved. That realization opens the door to a level of peace that does not depend on answers, outcomes, or emotional certainty. It leads you into a place where rest becomes possible even while questions remain. Learning to rest while your questions remain. There is a kind of rest that only comes when you stop demanding closure for every question. Not because the questions no longer matter, but because they no longer define your peace. Many people believe rest arrives after everything is resolved, after clarity is complete, after uncertainty disappears. But real rest often comes first. It comes when you accept that some answers will unfold with time, and that God is still trustworthy in the waiting. Resting while questions remain feels uncomfortable at first. Your mind is used to searching, analyzing, preparing. It wants certainty before relaxation. But God invites you into a different rhythm, one where trust replaces constant vigilance. One where you do not have to stay mentally alert to be safe. He teaches you that rest is not the reward for understanding everything. It is the environment where healing happens. When you learn to rest without answers, your relationship with God deepens. You stop approaching Him only as a source of solutions and begin to experience Him as a source of stability. You realize that His presence is enough to sustain you, even when clarity is incomplete. That realization softens the urgency in your thoughts. You still think, but you no longer panic. You still question, but you no longer spiral. This kind of rest is not passive. It is active trust. It is choosing to place your unanswered questions in God's hands instead of carrying them all day in your mind. It is allowing yourself to pause without guilt, to breathe without anxiety, to exist without needing to fix everything immediately. God does not rush this process. He knows rest cannot be forced. It must be received. As you practice this kind of rest, you begin to notice how much energy you regain. Mental space opens, emotional resilience grows. You feel more grounded, even though your situation may look the same on the outside. That grounding is not accidental. It is the result of releasing the belief that peace requires certainty. And as rest becomes familiar, something shifts again. You stop relying on emotional signals to measure God's closeness. You begin to sense his presence as something steady, reliable, and constant, not tied to how you feel on any given day. That discovery leads to a deeper understanding of what it means for God to stay close, not as a passing feeling, but as a daily anchor for your life. God's presence as a daily anchor, not a feeling. At some point, you begin to realize that feelings are unreliable guides. They rise and fall with circumstances, energy levels, and mental state. One day you feel close to God, confident, steady. The next day you feel distant, uncertain, distracted. If God's presence were tied to feelings, it would mean his nearness changes constantly. But God does not fluctuate with your emotions. He remains. And learning this changes the way you experience faith entirely. God's presence was never meant to be chased emotionally. It was meant to be trusted relationally. Feelings are responses, not foundations. When you rely on them to confirm God's closeness, you place your peace on unstable ground. God becomes something you sense only when conditions are right. But he wants to be known as the one who stays, even when conditions are difficult, even when your heart feels quiet, even when your mind is tired. An anchor does not stop the waves. It keeps the ship from drifting. God's presence works the same way. Life continues to move. Thoughts still arise. Emotions still shift. But his nearness keeps you grounded. It reminds you who you belong to when your thoughts try to convince you that you are alone. It steadies you when fear whispers that you are losing control. This understanding takes pressure off your spiritual life. You stop trying to feel something all the time. You stop measuring your faith by emotional intensity. You stop questioning your connection with God every time your mood changes. Instead, you begin to live from a place of quiet assurance. God is here, not because you feel him strongly, but because he promised to be present. When you embrace God as an anchor, you notice how your inner world responds differently to stress. Challenges still affect you, but they do not uproot you. Disappointments still hurt, but they do not define you. Your thoughts may become restless, but they no longer convince you that God has stepped away. His presence becomes a reference point, not a sensation you must constantly search for. This kind of faith is not dramatic. It is durable. It holds when emotions fail. It remains when clarity fades. It stays when answers are delayed. And once you begin to live anchored instead of emotionally driven, your relationship with God matures. It becomes less about what you feel and more about who he is. As this anchor settles deeper in your life, something naturally follows. The desire to speak to God, not from anxiety or desperation, but from trust, from closeness, from surrender. And that is where everything you have carried finds its release. Not in explanations, not in control, but in a final moment of honest prayer that gathers your mind, your heart, and your hope into one quiet place with God. Prayer for a calm mind and a hopeful heart. Now let me speak to you not as someone giving advice, but as someone standing beside you, and as Jesus speaking gently to your heart. You have carried enough. You have tried to understand, to manage, to stay strong, to hold everything together inside your mind. And I know how heavy that has been. So this is not a prayer to fix yourself. This is a prayer to rest in my presence. God, I come to you exactly as I am. My mind is tired. My thoughts have been loud. I have searched for peace in control, for clarity in answers, for security in understanding. And now I release that need. I ask you to stay close to me, not because I deserve it, but because you are faithful. Quiet what overwhelms me, not by force, but by your presence. Where my thoughts run ahead of my trust, slow them down. Where fear speaks louder than hope, speak truth. Where my heart feels weary, breathe life again. I do not ask you to explain everything. I ask you to remain with me in everything. Let your peace settle deeper than my questions. Let your nearness become more real than my worries. God, clear my mind from what I was never meant to carry alone. Take the pressure, take the weight, take the need to have it all figured out. Teach me to trust you in the quiet moments, in the unresolved moments, in the ordinary moments. Restore hope, not as excitement, but as confidence. Confidence that you are working even when I cannot see it. Confidence that I am not abandoned in this season. I place my thoughts in your hands. I place my future in your care. I place my heart in your presence. Stay close to me when my mind tries to pull away. Anchor me when emotions shift. Hold me steady when life feels uncertain. I choose rest over fear, trust over control, hope over despair. And as this prayer ends, let your peace remain. Let it follow me into the next moment, the next decision, the next quiet thought. I do not walk alone. I do not carry this by myself. You are here. You always have been, and that is enough.